What's up? Welcome to another episode of Still Processing, a 76ers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Chavalella, here with Justin as always. Today's episode of the podcast, we're going to discuss star hunting versus building that depth. Sixers have a lot of options this offseason, so Justin and I are going to kind of go 1v1 to see what option might be the best for the Philadelphia 76ers. All that and more on today's episode of Still Processing, a 76ers podcast. All right, welcome back to Take a Bar from my man Brian Cameron from Flipping the Birds. Welcome one, welcome all. Here to talk some Sixers basketball during the offseason. Thrilling round two in the NBA playoffs. Philadelphia obviously comfortably at home. Talking offseason. Justin, how you feeling this early offseason stages?
Was the second round really entertaining? Was it really? I don't know. That's debatable.
I liked it. I mean, like New York, Indiana was one thing, but like Denver and Minnesota, that was an OKC and Dallas, like that quality games.
Yeah, OKC and Dallas had some good games. A lot of blowouts everywhere, but nonetheless, entertaining the fact that the Knicks lost and the Nuggets lost.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk about entertaining, that's the entertaining part.
It wasn't bad there, I think it's kind of the same thing that has been for a while, and that is Western Conference good, Eastern Conference not that good. So that's kind of been the same. I don't know when that's going to change. Probably when Minnesota gets pushed into the East when they bring in two more teams. But
Yeah.
we'll see if that even happens, or if they try and move, New Orleans or something like that. But no, playoffs were interesting. I found myself, I think, rooting for the Timberwolves, but I like both Denver and Minnesota, so I was happy either way with how that went. Kind of same,
Ant-Man. I give all my energy to Ant-Man.
bro. Yeah, I listen. I ride or die with him until the end of these playoffs. Like he's been
Sure.
fantastic. The personality's been A1. The play has been even better. Cat, you got to give it up for Cat the way that he's played through this series and
Yeah.
just looked fantastic. I love the vibes. Jaden McDaniels, Mike Conley, I've been a huge fan of for years. Rudy Gobert is a comeback story of sorts. Totally solid. But before we get too deep into the playoff, I want to get one more playoff question, and then we'll go back to Sixers. Who's your team out of these final four?
Who's like the team I'm rooting for?
Yeah, just out of I'm not saying like who are you like attaching yourself at the hip to for the rest of your life. Like no, like for the rest of these playoffs, like who is the team that you can say and make sure it's clear either that you're picking or that you would want to win these finals.
Okay, I will want to see. I want to see Anthony Edwards. Like I'm such a big fan of him in his game, and for a while now. Then the personality just knocks it out the park. But like I'm definitely rooting for the Timberwolves. I thought I would never be saying that, but I'm definitely rooting for them. In the West and in the East, I'm just like before these playoffs. We've talked about this before, even previously when we were covering the Sixers when he did his audition. Tyrese Halliburton had an audition game in Philly. We had like 40, and we were talking about it after the game. Like, yo, he really like saying, "Come get me." But I like watching Tyrese Halliburton, so I'm definitely Pacers. But honestly, nobody but Boston. That's really what it comes down to at this point. So that's who I'm rooting for. Anybody but Boston. So you can't lock me in the corner.
I was texting my buddy last night, and I swear I said the exact same thing. I said anybody but Boston is who I'm rooting for going forward. I do like Minnesota a lot. Obviously we were just talking about that, and we were talking before the show about it. And like, how do you not like Anthony Edwards, man? It's just people talk about like the second coming of Jordan and stuff like that, and it's like it is like in a way that that swag and I'll be honest, like he may not like maybe you don't see him locking himself, in a gym at 3 in the morning, but clearly he busts his own ass to get better and better at this game. So one of those tireless workers that you just love
Exactly.
to watch.
And I'll say this. I think the Timberwolves Boston matchup probably most likely. And I would say that both teams are equal at a standpoint, and it would be, in my opinion, a good series. And if the Timberwolves would beat the Boston Celtics, I don't think anybody would be surprised. But I would say for Twitter meltdown purposes, the Mavericks going to the finals and Luka single-handedly dismantling Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown will be delicious television. So that would be good too.
Yeah, there's really not a bad option. They're saying Timberwolves Celtics is fighting for the legacy of Kevin Garnett. So series, watching Ant go up against Tyrese, and
Mhm.
that'd be a fun series. Then also you're talking about Luka against Tyrese. That's another kind of fun matchup there. And then of course Luka versus the Celtics. Like, there's not bad television any way you slice it. And
Yeah.
even though New York didn't make it, it looks like we're still going to have pretty good basketball. So I guess you don't need that big market, shoving its way
No.
into the
We haven't
Eastern
had it for 20 years. We don't care.
the world keeps on turning, as
Yes.
as expected. So, but we're focused on the Philadelphia 76ers here. We're talking about offseason plans, what's up to come for this team, what will Daryl Morey and the front office do, and kind of the big pitch of Daryl Morey's career, right, has been star hunting. This concept of just getting top talent and things will work itself out. Has that gone according to plan over Daryl Morey's career? No, it has not. Yes, he's had great acquisitions such as James Harden, and some of those James Harden teams, really put the prime Golden State Warriors up on a hill, like to the point where they were legitimately competitive with them. So there were some fantastic teams to show for this work. Obviously, they have not been to the finals. Not even won the finals, have not been to the finals. In Philly, in Houston, did not work bringing James Harden to Philadelphia, right? Last year was the quote unquote gap year where expectations actually ended up being a little bit more than expected, even when the Sixers were the 7th seed, just because of how good Joel and Tyrese were last year. But now, no more excuses, right? There's no more Ben Simmons on the roster. There's no more James Harden on the roster. There's no more Al Horford on the roster. There's no more Tobias Harris, right? All of that's gone. You have cap space. You have draft picks. You have 2 stars in/entering their prime that you can rely on in the postseason. So, with that being said, where do you go from here? Do you opt into that star hunting mentality, and do you try and either pluck one of these top free agents, Paul George or LeBron James, even a Pascal Siakam, who's now at least in the Eastern Conference Finals? Or do you go the trade route? Do you look for a Donovan Mitchell? Do you look for, I'll just throw his name out because it's been talked about, Darius Garland, Brandon Ingram? Is that more so the path that you find yourself going down? So that's kind of our focus here today, Justin. We're going to kind of start with you here. What do you think the Sixers should do? And keep it as large or as small as you want, like big picture, little picture. But what is your best outcome for the Philadelphia 76ers this offseason?
So my best outcome, and I'm also, you know, preface it by saying that um let's look at Daryl Morey's track record as well, right? So like this is kind of the first year where he's been a Sixer where he's kind of punted, right? Like somewhat, right? You could say after the trade deadline, but I feel like what they are gonna do and what fits their mold is star hunting. Now, we've seen in Phoenix how that's looked. We've seen in other places how that's looked. But I ultimately think that to fit this team right, they need a third star. And I think that, everybody has a lot of people have reservations about Paul George, and I have mine as well, but he just fits this team right now. His willingness to shoot, catch and shoot threes, his ability to create on his own. He has some playmaking skills as well. although he's not as athletic as he was 5 years ago, but he still has some athleticism, his ability to defend, although he was not guarding Luka that much during the series against Dallas, but his ability to do that, I feel like that fits well. I feel like one of the biggest things with the Sixers in general is just counting on somebody else when one of the two guys aren't having a good game. And I think that, Kelly Oubre tried to step up to the plate as much as possible while Tobias Harris shrunk in most moments. But, I think that's a lot to depend on from a guy like Kelly Oubre. So getting
Yeah.
another star in the fold, I think makes sense. But I think it should be the right star. I think it should
Yeah.
be the right fit. I don't think that it should be star hunting just to star hunt. Like it doesn't make sense to me to go after particular guys when you may burn all your assets and you can't make any upgrades later or tinker later, like, whatever. Like, Paul George makes the most sense. You don't have to use any of your five, first round draft picks that you have that are tradable or any of your other assets. I just think that from that standpoint, Paul George makes sense. Now, the likelihood, we're all still up on the air because we think that, the Clippers opening that new building, eventually they're going to pony up on the money. But he would be the best fit for this team right now. And I just think that it will be, they have the potential to have literally three All Stars. Um, and with their injury history, Embiid and Paul George, I do think that there's a likelihood that one is available to help Tyrese, specifically in those games where, we saw when Embiid was out how they kind of folded, on most nights. Now it was good for Tyrese's development, but he had to do a lot. He won't be tracked nearly as much with a guy like Paul George on the court. He just won't because he'll be able to make you pay.
Yeah, I mean, Paul George, I think the archetype is the one that teams look for so long, like desperately, and these guys get even kind of like put up on a pedestal sometimes, where you talk about guys like Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. These are clearly super helpful players in position. And we're talking about wings with size, 3 and D guys, and yeah, there's a whole lot of use that come out of those players, with that size. The one thing from a star perspective, and this is actually a pro Paul George argument in my mind, like when's the last time that we saw one of those guys actually lead the team all the way, right? So in my mind, LeBron's not even really a 3 and D guy. He's probably the closest that we've seen like that. Because Kevin Durant, like you can say what you want about his performance, and he's been stellar at times in the playoffs, but it's kind of a cop out when you're playing against, alongside Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green with the prime Golden State Warriors. But if you look, guys like Jason Tatum haven't had that kind of success. Obviously, Jalen Brown's been with him, not having that success. Paul George historically has not had that success as the guy, right? So when we're talking about these like secondary or tritary options for teams, that's where Paul George kind of fits like a glove, right? You talked about him off ball. I think that's where he fits on both sides. No, he's not the defender he used to be. He's not the athlete he used to be. He's not the scorer he used to be. But you don't need that, right? So you just need a guy who, and this is kind of like semantics. You don't need another ISO heavy guy. You don't need a James Harden guy, but you need a bucket getter, right? You need that guy who's going to be able to get that shot when you need it, just like you said. So from that perspective, I do agree. The right star is definitely a solid avenue worth going down. Paul George, where you don't have to give up many assets to get the guy, again, makes total sense. Myself, I kind of coming around on the idea of adding, and part of this is, I guess, just the thought of Paul George eventually signing in LA, kind of like you mentioned. But I'm kind of coming around on the idea of adding certain role players, and you need the right players, right? So I have, obviously my guys in mind, but you need the right guys. I'm not talking about, you trade one of each of the 5 first round picks for 5 different role players to eat into the cap. I'm talking about maximizing what you can do this free agency to make the best team possible out of those guys, and then also keep your flexibility going forward, keep that optionality, right? So we're talking about adding proven playoff performers and guys who kind of fit areas of need through the free agency. Guys like a Caleb Martin from Miami is a name that I, in particular, do love for Philadelphia. Talking about guys like Malik Monk is probably one of those like top, in that B tier, B or C tier free agents that you can possibly look for, but an electric scorer who can dish the ball as well. Those are the guys that I don't mind. Bringing back guys like Kelly Oubre and Buddy Hield. I don't think Philadelphia is done with Buddy. I understand Daryl Morey's comments. Everyone heard the first part where he didn't fit as well, that being Buddy didn't fit as well as expected. I heard the second part where he said that he thinks that he can fit better next year. So, with that in mind, if you bring this team back with a solid, let's call it 8, 9 guys, like eight, 9 playoff performers, not only does that give you a solid team heading into the postseason, not only does it give you guys, and especially if you choose the right kind of guys, because Malik Monk's that kind of bucket getter that I talked about, right? Where it makes life easier for your Tyrese Maxey, for your Joel Embiid. But on top of that, it makes it a lot easier to facilitate a trade at the deadline or thereafter, because now not only do you have draft picks of value, but you have players that you can trade of value, which matters as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that. I mean, although some others may not look at it as fits more backcourt, but I do like the Malik Monk thought. Just I feel like he is someone who isn't scared of the moment. I feel like regardless of what his shooting percentage is, night in and night out, he's still going to attempt to be, a scorer and a shot creator. But you know, it makes sense specifically around the trade deadline piece when you talk about actually having salaries to cobble together to make a big move if you need. But I think that one of the things that we've learned is that starting off the year as with a roster and working through everything and having that consistency does help teams a lot. Now, is it always going to help you win? Boston's had the same core for whenever, and yes, they've gone to Eastern Conference championships. Eastern Conference Finals, and went to have one finals appearance. But that isn't necessarily you're going to win. But it does feel like I increase your chances. So I think we all will have a ticking time bomb on when the roster will be imploded when a star asks out if they go the route that you're going. Like, we're literally going to be moving and shaking for when the rumors start going around again, and it's okay. Well, then who do you put together on the roster that you just signed? After they're trade eligible in January, like who's gonna go to get the star, and then you got to try to make it work on the fly again. And then if they lose in the second round or the first round, it's gonna like, oh, we didn't have enough time. So it's like, I don't know, maybe you get that star early and start it off, and then have some continuity, and then you work with what you got. And hopefully you got guys who will like the team, knowing that you'll be around these guys. You will have some cap left over if you get rid of B-Ball Paul or include B-Ball Paul in a trade for somebody else, and have some cap room. Get some couple mid-tier guys, and then some guys on vet minimums who wouldn't mind playing on vet minimums. They already have some of those guys. Nico, probably. Kalo, Campaign, more than likely. So yeah, you bring some of those guys back. You have some of that continuity. You bring in that third star. I think it could bode well for Philly.
Yeah, I mean, for me, as long as you are solving the areas of need, that's the biggest thing. And is that area star power? I think you can argue that, but I really think that you can argue that secondary shot creation, or and even self shot creation is a core need, and that's why a guy like Malik Monk fills that need there. And then on top of that, you need shot makers and you need guys who can D up. So we're talking about guys. I already mentioned Caleb Martin. We're talking about guys like Gary Harris out of Orlando is a name that makes sense. And there's a lot of these lower level guys, kind of like that Gary Harris. Hayward Highsmith is a free agent out of Miami. Philadelphia 76ers fans probably a little bit familiar with him from his time with the Sixers. We could be talking about a Dario Saric reunion where you're talking about a guy who can do a little bit of playmaking, a little bit of shooting, and kind of play that small ball five for Philadelphia. Kind of a good lightning to Paul Reed's thunder in a sense there when you're talking about the backup five. But there's options. Yes, where you're paying a little bit more, like a Malik Monk in free agency, not as much as a Paul George, but still rather up there. And then there's options that you can get on solid deals, for 10 or less million. And with the amount of cap space that Philadelphia has ahead of this free agency market, like there's a wealth of different opportunities. I mean, Derek Jones Jr. is a guy, like there are just so many different ways that you can go with this offseason. And I think you don't want to limit yourself. I think that's the last thing that you want to do is kind of put yourself in a hole, kind of pigeonhole yourself and just put yourself in a box where it's like, all right, well, we're all in on this move. Whether it works or not, this is it. And so that's the thing is, I've had conversations around Donovan Mitchell, for instance. Let's talk about that. He's a little ISO heavy for what I want. Do I think that the Sixers would be better with Donovan Mitchell? Absolutely. He's a stud player. Is he the best option for Philadelphia? Well, that's where I start to back off a little bit, just because, yes, he is a little more ISO dominant than you would want. He would cost more than one because you're emptying the chest for Donovan Mitchell. That's it. You're not getting him for 3 first-round picks or whatever. You're every pick swap. That's going to be what it costs to compete with, Miami, to compete with New York and Brooklyn and all these other teams that are going to be trying to get him. So, if that's the route that you're trying to go, you have to be 100% certain that that's going to put you over the top. And could it? It certainly could. I just like having that flexibility because we've seen things go wrong in Philadelphia, and it almost kind of feels like a matter of time. So, scared money don't make no money, but I still
right.
I want a way out.
So the thought process around this whole, like every move that was made this year, and specifically with the Harden deal, like cap space plan. Like we're trade for somebody to absorb the cap space, or we're gonna, we want that star. We want that star. I'm thinking that, and Daryl Morey's thinking, and so much pressure is on him, right? This offseason that he has to come away with a star. Like that's going to be his mindset, like any means necessary. Because if you don't get one this offseason, yeah, like you said, you can fill the roster with some complementary pieces and, have where you just have your two guys and then, maybe you have two guys that are capable of being a third guy on different nights, right? That's definitely possible. But I just think that his outlook and what you've seen in the past and his track record that, star hunting is kind of where he's going to be going. And the only reason they didn't do it at the deadline, I believe, is because they didn't know if Joel Embiid was truly going to come back and
No, I
what
mean,
type of
what
shape
was there
he was
even a
going to be
star
in.
available? Like the closest you can say is DeJounte Murray, but I mean,
Right.
to your point, like that's the other half of it is that there wasn't really anyone available.
Yeah. Although I would have made that deal, but whatever.
Well, I think in hindsight, a lot of people probably would. And honestly, like even this offseason, I wouldn't hate revisiting the DeJounte Murray conversation. That's kind of another avenue is trading for one of those second tier guys, and whether it's DeJounte Murray. There's been conversation about Kyle Kuzma. I'm not a Kuzma guy, but just throwing out a guy around that fringe. I think he's kind of like that Tobias tier. But if we're talking about guys like around that all-star caliber, I'd include Brandon Ingram in that conversation as well,
Me too.
where it's not necessarily true star hunting. But the one thing I'll say about Brandon Ingram is that there seem to be enough people who have convinced themselves to buy into Ingram stock that I think that market's going to be way too competitive for Philadelphia, and you're going to end up overspending. That's the one concern, not the one. Let's call that the primary concern. I have a bunch of other concerns with Brandon Ingram that we'll talk about another day, but that's the primary concern for me. But you talk about a guy like DeJounte Murray, if you can get him for a half decent price, and I'd consider that around 2 firsts and a pick and a first round pick swap. You're talking about a guy who is cheap enough that you can still afford to sign guys in free agency and can make an impact from day one for you and can even grow with your team. So for that to happen, he'd have to kind of buy into a role and not want to be the guy, which I think is part of the problem he has in Atlanta. But there's a pathway to it if he's willing to buy in.
Yeah, and I think that that's what people have talked about. I can't remember who I heard say it, but they were saying that some of the issues that he has in general is that teams that are looking for him, they're trying to figure out what role he's looking for, and a lot of it he's looking to be the only guy or the main guy, and he just won't be a winner, right, on a winning team if he's the guy. I mean, we've seen the San Antonio Spurs when he was the guy, and I do think in the beginning it may be a little bit of a clunky fit, but he can make it work. And I think that's just another ball handler. Somebody else can get their own shot that can help out. But I mean, he suffices, like you said, as a star. Even if you, like I said, Paul George would be the probably perfect fit. But when you look around and you look at B tier stars um, who are in that range to still allow you to make moves in free agency, he comes to mind. I think you said like Brandon Ingram comes to mind as well. I know some people have talked about Jeremy Grant, which I don't think he's a star. He's more of a C tier in my opinion, but he would
You talk about a
bring,
guy who is more concerned with getting his own shot than winning basketball, and that's
yeah,
Jeremy Grant. I mean, that's as bad as DeJounte Murray, reportedly has been in regards to that. That's the one reason I'm not interested in. I would love to have Jeremy Grant here if it wasn't for the fact that he's trying to be some team's leading scorer.
I know he is. And again, that's a problem. Or, like I don't know. It's just you look around the league and you
Well,
kind of
everyone's
try
looking
to
for the
find some of
next
this.
Aaron Gordon, right? So that's
Yeah, and
what
that's
all Philly talked about this not that long ago. Everyone's looking for the next Aaron Gordon, the next super utility role player, and of course, Philadelphia would love to have that. And what could that look like? Could that be, Jeremy Grant was actually the first Aaron Gordon before he decided that he wanted just to make a lot of money and score a lot of buckets. But then you look at guys like DeJounte Murray. Again, he's following more that Jeremy Grant path and that Aaron Gordon path. What can you do? Can you go back to a guy like a Bruce Brown? Toronto's looking to move him for a first round
right.
pick. That's expensive for a guy who scored 10 points last year.
Yeah,
I think more so you might be looking at like the Alex Caruso kind of territory for that price.
right. And then also when you think about other stars that you can trade, you look at, I don't know, the interest now that it's less years left on the contract. Does that Levine interest the Sixers at all? You talk about that. Mikal Bridges, of course, everybody talks about Mikal Bridges all the time, but the Nets are saying that they want to pair somebody with him. And then outside of that, they probably will want to try to get 3 or 4 first round picks for Mikal Bridges, who's not a knock on him, and I like his game, and he's a good third piece, but he's obviously shown that he can't be the number one guy on the team. This was the year for him to be an all-star in the Eastern Conference on the Nets when he's the number one option. And, he had a pretty good season, pretty solid season, but he wasn't it. And then the only other person you could think about is Laurie Marketing, but you already know that
Utah's not
Danny
trading him.
Age, yeah,
Yeah.
so that's not happening.
Yeah, and as far as Mike Bridges, and I love Mike Bridges. I love his game. I think that he's a stand-up person from everything that I've ever heard from anyone who's spoken to him, been close with him. Um, Fantastic archetype of player too. Doesn't matter. I honestly don't even know that he can be the second best player on a team, let alone the best player on a team, unless that team's like Minnesota. Like I think he, could potentially in that case, but like it's tough to see. So if we're talking about giving 4+ first round picks for a guy who may be an all-star like one more time in his career, like that's crazy if I'm being straight honest. Like, you have to hold on to these picks because again, like, and I'm not saying you have to hold on to them and you don't trade them for anyone, but you have to be careful with when you trade these picks because this is again possibly your last shot of the Joel Embiid era. So, you can't just be throwing 4 picks at a guy who is probably going to give you like 18 points and solid and really strong defense. Like you're going to have to do better than that if you're going to be moving that many picks. So, Like that's part of the reason why going for a guy like Paul George, I get it. It makes sense because you get a guy who can, score 20 plus, score efficiently, in a way that's conducive to your existing offense. And again, I don't mind it because it gives you that optionality going forward as well. But, for me, I don't mind biding my time a little bit, building some consistency, some cohesion. You can bring back guys like Kelly Oubre, Buddy Hield, Nick Batum. I would imagine Kyle Lowry's back if he doesn't retire next year. So yeah, bring back some of that and kind of build on that with Embiid and with Maxey. The chemistry in the locker room was really strong, particularly between those guys and Kelly Oubre. So he's someone in particular that I think the team would look into bringing back. But just kind of building up on that going forward and bringing in some extra outside talent, like we talked about, who can really just help make a difference for this team. Because I get it, they lost in the first round this year. You can't say if Joel Embiid were healthy because that never happens. But I honestly believe that this team was not that far away from, in theory, making it to the Eastern Conference Finals. If you put this team, let's say that they did get past New York, which they didn't, so you can't say that they did. But if they did, I think they match up fine against Indiana. They're not going to stop them offensively. But I just think that Joel was so dominant against Indiana, and Tyrese is a guy who they're not stopping either because Indiana's defense is not their calling card. I think that they would have had a chance to move on to the Eastern Conference Finals either way if they had beaten New York. So all that just to say, if you bring in, a couple of solid starting level guys, proven playoff performers, I think that can make all the difference. A big problem for Philadelphia is that a lot of their role players just forgot how to shoot when they got into the postseason. Buddy Hield went through the first 5 games looking like he didn't even belong in the NBA. And he got back into it come game 6. It's, too little, too late. Game 6 or game 5. Yeah, game 6. It's too little, too late, but even still, hopefully he can rebound into that next year. Oubre was the guy that you liked what you saw out of him in the postseason. He wasn't always there offensively, but he was there when they needed him, and defensively, he was one of the star performers of the team. Nick Batum, again, another guy that you can rely on. So bringing back some of these guys next year, I think, is the way that you want to go with it. And from there, it's just improving that talent around. So making sure that you can get guys who can defend on the perimeter. I don't want to say that you need dogs. You need, obviously you need guys who are going to hustle. You need guys who are going to pull down offensive boards, everything such as that. But, more importantly, I need guys who are going to be hard-nosed defenders, and I need guys who are going to knock down shots. So, yeah, again, we're back to Caleb Martin. That's where I'm going to find myself a lot this offseason. Even if they do star hunt, there's that's the guy for me that I feel like you got to land, or that's the type of guy. And even if you want to go Haywood Highsmith instead of Caleb Martin, that's fine by me as well. But you just need guys who've proven it on the playoff level that they're not going to back down to anyone, and that they're going to be able to knock open an open shot.
Yeah, they definitely need some of those guys. You're right, and hopefully you got guys who want to change the scenery. Slash, they see that if they get a third star with Maxey and Embiid, that they like that situation better, and they try to go like one guy that I would look into, and I don't know if Phoenix is going to try to retain him, but Royce O'Neal, like, he could do a little bit of everything, right? He can handle the ball, he can play defense, he can shoot, he can play the 3, the 4, the 5. Like, he could just do a lot, and I think his versatility is something they should go after. But obviously, he fits a lot better when he's with other stars, so that he can really hit his open threes and attack closeouts and make plays for others. So, Royce O'Neal is somebody who I would hope the Sixers will look into, but his market might be expensive, for and then I don't know, you gotta see. Like, would it be worth if you could get somehow Mikal Bridges and Dorian Finney-Smith? Would that be worth 4 first-round draft picks?
See, now you're trying hard to convince me. I mean,
I'm
Bridges
just asking a
and Dorian
question.
Finney. I don't think Brooklyn. I don't think Brooklyn would do. I would definitely think about it for Philadelphia, because if
All
you
right,
think
five,
about
five, five.
5, I'm out if I'm Philly. Like that's the thing
Okay,
is
yeah,
like,
right.
like that's it. But you're asking good questions. Like you're setting the line. Like I think about where it would be theoretically. Like, but if you're talking about 4 and you get Bridges and DFS, like I think that's something more so that you'd have to consider because Finney Smith in his own right is a solid playoff worthy contributor. You could see that just by how much he impacted those Dallas Mavericks teams and how
Yep,
much Dallas wanted him back after they traded him away in the Kyrie Irving deal. So
right.
to have a player like that, obviously there's a lot of benefit there. The one thing, and this is just on Finney Smith in general, not talking about with a Bridges trade, is that you just want to you got to begin to watch because now he's 31. You know, now's the time where some of those traits might be slipping a little bit, right? So he's kind of beginning to exit that prime. So is he still worth, let's say, a first round pick on his own? It's tough to see because he also has not been playing in that winning environment like he was in Dallas. So you're not able to to truly see his value. But I would love to get one of those types of guys, a Caleb Martin, a Dorian Finney-Smith, a Royce O'Neal, like you said, and we there kind of is one in Philadelphia in Nico Batum. But to get another one really, I think would be immensely impactful for Philadelphia. So again, that's regardless of star hunting or building through depth, but that's kind of a must have, especially in the wake of the new Sixers era without Tobias Harris. Like the power forward position, it's not the most important position in basketball, but it is one that the Sixers are going to have to hit on this offseason because they are. I mean, if you look at the roster right now, and as is the case for multiple positions, I guess, but the depth chart's empty there, right? So you're completely rebuilding that spot, and a lot of people can and will say that just not having Tobias might end up being addition by subtraction in a sense, just because that like and I hate to say it, but like that marriage was ugly by the end. Like talk about staying together for the kids. Like it just was horrendous. So I think Harris is going to have a better outlook from here on out. I think Philadelphia is going to have a better outlook here on out, just by separating ways. But you still need to replace a guy, and I hate to use what Tobias Harris said because obviously he didn't live up to it. But you're talking about a 6'9", he's really 6'7", but a 6'9" guy who can shoot, can defend, and blah 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 blah. Like that is the kind of guy that you do want, though. Is that guy in that 6'7" to 6'9" range, can shoot a little bit and can defend, most importantly.
Now I want a crumble cookie.
I, eh, 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 I don't know. Much like other things, it overrated if you ask me. But
Yeah,
it is going to be interesting to see where they go. Because if I had to, let's kind of pivot to this. If you're talking about positionally, right? So let's forget the star hunter thing, for a second. Let's just talk about kind of the general needs. And I know we're in the era of positionless basketball, but let's kind of narrow in on generalized positions for a second, right? What would you say the biggest or the biggest two positional needs for Philadelphia next year would be?
like are we? Okay, they need a shooting guard because I'm caught up as a shooting guard who is a secondary ball handler, and they need a small forward slash power forward who has the ability to create offense on his own. Um, Literally plays run for him and end of shot clock. That's what they need.
Gotcha.
So I
Yeah.
think small forward, power forward, because those lines are blurred at this point in the NBA. And then definitely a shooting guard who is a secondary ball handler, um, because you clearly need somebody else who can dribble so that a trap doesn't completely destroy the offense.
Yeah, so I think that we're pretty much agreed here. My verbiage is slightly different, but I think we're all talking about the same things. So ideally, you're talking about, and I use this phrase because is Tyrese really a point guard? Is he a shooting guard? Who really cares, right? So you need a guard with size who can both pass and defend, right? And you need a wing who can shot create, right? Those are the two biggest things. So whether that's Paul George, because he would definitely answer that question as a shot creating wing, that's perfectly fine. If you're possibly talking about trading for Lauri Markkanen, that's a shot creating wing right there. Like those are the kind of guys that are going to get the kind of most buzz when you're talking about the Philadelphia 76ers. But as long as you have someone who can, in a general sense, affect the game positively in that way, and guys like DeMar. I think DeMar DeRozan's going back to Chicago, so he's a guy that we'll excuse from that kind of conversation. And the problem with free agency is there aren't too many. Like once you get past LeBron and Paul George, there's not too many of those guys. Like Siakam's probably going back to Indiana, especially after making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and then from there, like where's your shot creation at the 3 and the 4, right? So
No
that's
Harrison
kind of the
Barnes.
difficult. Harrison Barnes.
I know. I'm playing.
Well, okay. So it's a joke, obviously, but you did kind of bring me to where I was eventually going to end up. Not off of this point, but we'll get to it a little early, I guess. One last thing, and we'll kind of end on this. What is your interest level, if it even comes to be? Because I think the expectation is that he signs with Detroit, and in that case, he'd likely sign into cap. But if Tobias Harris does not sign outright with a team, and there's the possibility to sign and trade Tobias, let's talk about the guys that you think might be in that conversation. So, like, we're talking about you're not getting back, like Donovan Mitchell in a sign and trade for Tobias Harris, right? So let's kind of think about what happened with Jimmy Butler, right? So the Sixers got back Josh Richardson. Would you take that kind of a situation where you're taking back a little less money for a player who's a little bit, quote unquote, worse, in that kind of situation? So the guys that I'm thinking of are Harrison Barnes. Sacramento's had interest in Tobias Harris before. And guys like Andrew Wiggins, who the Golden State Warriors have had some. I know, I saw the face. But I'm just saying, if we're going out there and we're talking about trying to get these two-way 3-and-D wings, and we're all effectively talking about the same thing if we're talking about Tobias Harris, Harrison Barnes, and what was Andrew Wiggins last year. But is there a modicum of interest, or are you just like, let's just forget this guy ever played for Philadelphia? We're not using bird years. We're not using sign and trade. None of that. Just go sign in Utah or Detroit or whatever and be happy.
Yeah, I need my man. And again, Tobias is a great guy. But his time here is done. Not facilitating a deal for the Sixers may do it out of respect because of who we are to facilitate to get him to a place he wants to go if he doesn't have the options that he needs, or the places he want to go don't have the necessary cap space to do that. So I could see them facilitating that just off the strength of how he is, but what he's done for the franchise and the community and stuff like that, as far as being present and a leader and having a book club and all that. And
well,
again,
let's do
I'm
it this
not,
way.
but
let's
I'm
do it this
looking
way.
like you bring up Andrew Wiggins. Andrew
Yeah.
Wiggins' contract is nasty work for what, like, well, or so 26 million next year, 28 million the following year after that. Then he has a player option for 30 million. Now, if he played like he played during the Golden State final run, cool. But he missed too many games, and he's not going to play like that. And for some reason, he forgot how to shoot. And the Sixers have had far too many people walk into Philadelphia and forget how to shoot the basketball. Like, you can't do it.
I hear. All right. Well, let's just play a little yes no with this. I'm gonna give you some
All right,
names. All
I'm
right,
cool with that.
and you just hit me with a yes or a no. Okay.
Okay.
And we'll keep draft pick compensation out of it. I think Wiggins is a case where maybe you could get like a protected first out of Golden State in a sign and trade with Harris. Let's keep all that out. Let's keep it neat and clean. Let's just do player for player. Right.
Okay.
So Andrew Wiggins, we got a no. Right.
No.
Okay.
Hard no.
A hard no. Okay. Harrison Barnes.
No.
That's another no. Okay. Now this one I've been thinking about: Los Angeles Lakers, Rui Hachimura. Oh, we got some
Yes.
silence. Oh, we got a yes. Okay, see,
Mm,
that there is a
yeah.
path to this being viable, right? And the Lakers, desperate to keep LeBron. They don't care about proper roster construction. They just want to bring as many big names and high scorers to the team as possible, right? So they, it makes sense in that way. Another guy that I've been thinking about, just wondering where his trade value is now. There's questions about his knees. That's not great for Philadelphia, but that's why this is even possible for a conversation in the first place. But let's talk about Memphis. Let's talk about Marcus Smart.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So there's
Yeah.
there's there's a little
He
bit
would
of
be the
here.
perfect guard next to Maxi.
Yeah, I mean that's really the kind of guy that you're looking for. The guy who is capable of shooting from the outside, is a high level defender. Again, the knees are a major question mark. Like that's the whole
Yeah.
reason why this is even part of the conversation. This would not be like if Marcus Smart of like 2 years ago was the guy that we were talking about, we wouldn't even be talking about him, right?
Right.
So it all depends on the comfortability level of Smart and his knees. But let's move on to the next guy here, right? So we're gonna take a look over in Houston, and let's talk about one Dylan Brooks.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, you get a why not for Dylan Brooks. Okay, yeah, why the heck not? Yeah, absolutely. Well, now here's the thing: if we look over to a lot of these Western Conference teams, probably aren't going to be interested in Tobias. A lot of these other teams are going to have the cap space to potentially sign him. Utah will have the cap space. Detroit will have the cap space. Let's move on. Oh, you know what? Let's take a look over to Charlotte. And what would you say about a sign and trade for Grant Williams?
No. Hell no.
No,
Keep that man
because
as
he's just
far
too
away from
corny as
Philadelphia.
hell, or what? Like, is it?
Yeah, like no, we don't need him. Everybody hates him. He's a bad locker room guy.
Uh,
He,
Several
he
Mavericks players did come out and fight that rumor. Like, let's
I
put that
don't.
out there too.
I
But
mean, they. I don't know. I'm good.
all right, so
Dylan Brooks
we're
is only making $20 or less for the remainder of his next 3 years. I would do that. Grant
okay.
Williams,
All right, the 13 million a year for 3 years, like fixes your power forward to the future, 3-and-D power forward. I'm just
no.
saying. I'm just
Everybody
all right.
complaining about, and I'm not, and I will tell you this, and the last thing I'll say, and then we can close or whatever we're gonna do. We already have one. We already have one guy that people outside of Philadelphia thinks has an issue with their weight. We can't have two guys. Now, I'm saying that on a simple fact that we actually covered a team, C Embiid. People literally had the nerve, national people literally had the nerve to say that Embiid gained weight when he was off, when he actually looked thinner, like way thinner coming back from injury. And it was very noticeable. But the old tired narrative of him having too much weight is something that people are just going to say without actually paying attention to what's going on with him. But I'm say that to all say that like we can't have him and Grant Williams and everybody talk about how we got the beefiest front court in the NBA. Can't deal with it. So no, thank you on Grant Williams.
Okay, all right. I will say, just as we talked about Joel's weight, I think that there's a right way and a wrong way to have that conversation, right? So, the wrong way, obviously, is the way that you just laid out. The right way is, should he potentially make a body type transition just for preservation purposes, right? I don't think he's necessarily like quote unquote out of shape like he was at the end of last year because he had not conditioned because he was injured for 2 months, right? He came into the year plenty conditioned. So last year conditioning wasn't the concern, but to ease up on his body, yeah, maybe there. So let's just go into the last guy here, though, for the Tobias Harris sign and trade. I'm going to talk about an even jankier player than Grant Williams. And this is, mind you, a situation where Jared Allen of the Cleveland Cavaliers is expected to be moved this offseason. He's not the guy that I'm talking about coming to Philadelphia. I think he's going to be too popular for a Tobias Harris sign and trade. But if we're talking about moving Tobias Harris into sign and trade to Cleveland and you bring in Karis LeVert to Philadelphia, how do you feel about that?
You know what? I was just talking to some of my friends about this. Yo, I would do it. And I'm going to tell you why I would do it. Because at least Karis LeVert has multiple ways of like janky scoring. Like some nights he thinks he's Michael Jordan, some nights he's Kobe Bryant, then other nights he's Raul Neto. So it's like you got to spin the wheel to see which Karis LeVert you're gonna get, but you will get the good Karis LeVert sometimes. With Tobias, by the end of his tenure here, there was no spinning of the wheel. You got bad Tobias all the time. So I would think about that. I'll probably do that.
Yeah. So the thought process again with all these names is, you take a look at free agency and you're talking about guys who maybe Philadelphia misses out on, or maybe they deem that they're not proper fits, and you're kind of looking for guys around that. I'd probably say around like that $15 to $20 million range that you could bring on in and potentially help improve this roster a little bit. There's some other teams that I think could interest Tobias Harris. The Orlando Magic, some as a team that some have spoken about. Again, they have the cap space just to bring him right in. So that's kind of the rock and the hard place that you find yourself here. More so, there's the question of, do you take a chance on a guy like a Harrison Barnes or an Andrew Wiggins, recap some draft capital out of the equation, and then try and rehab the player to then ship off again. Like that's something that usually teams that aren't in contention status do, but we'll see what exactly happens in Philadelphia going forward. But the theme of the entire offseason, Howie Roseman would love it. He would love to be in charge of the Philadelphia 76ers right now because the theme is optionality, right? Howie's favorite word. So still plenty of options to go. The NBA draft is still on its way. We'll talk about some draft prospects on future pod, even though the Sixers are probably going to trade that pick. But, we do want to go over a few of the different guys who can help the team both in the short term and the long term future and kind of go from there. But just a lot to still kind of chew on and think about in terms of what should the Sixers do, what will the Sixers do, and let us know in the comment sections what you guys would do if you were heading up the Philadelphia 76ers. If you're Daryl Morey, are you going star hunting? If so, who are you targeting? Or are you building that depth? And again, if so, who are you adding to this Sixers team to really kind of round things out? But thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening, supporting this podcast, supporting Philly Sports Network, Metro Philadelphia. My name is Zach Chavalella, as always, here with my guy, Justin Crosby. Thank you so much. Tune in for the next episode of Still Processing, a 76ers podcast.